3 months passed. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like humanity was doing exactly what a small wounded species was expected to do. Ambassador Diane Watts continued filing protests with the Galactic Council. She attended every session, she followed every rule, she submitted formal complaints, requested hearings, and cited galactic law with perfect precision. The Council barely noticed. High Arbiter Zorath told his staff that the humans were handling it as well as could be expected. The Vithari ambassador openly laughed during one session when Watts requested compensation for the colonists who died. He called it entertaining. Watts smiled politely and returned to her quarters. She opened her secure terminal and transmitted another batch of intelligence data to Earth, the locations of Vithari supply lines, fleet patrol routes, and political alliances within the Council. She had been doing this every day for 3 months. The Vithari thought she was a bureaucrat. The Council thought she was wasting her time. Neither of them understood what she really was. She was buying time. Back on Earth and across the lunar surface, something extraordinary was happening. Director Aaron Price had authorized a full wartime mobilization. Every shipyard, every factory, every research lab on Earth, the Moon, Mars, and the orbital stations was running at maximum capacity, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Luna shipyards had never seen anything like it. Workers moved in shifts that never stopped. Welding torches burned through the night. Hull plates the size of city blocks were assembled, fitted, and sealed in days instead of months. New ships took shape in their construction cradles, bigger and deadlier than anything humanity had built before. Dr. Linda Marsh barely slept. She led a team of over 300 scientists and engineers, working in a facility buried deep under the Copernicus crater. Their job was simple in concept and staggering in execution. Take everything they had learned from the salvaged Vithari weapons technology recovered from New Helena, and make it better. The Vithari used plasma-based weapons. Marsh's team studied them, understood them, and then redesigned them from the ground up. The result was a weapon system that hit harder, recharged faster, and was more accurate than anything the Vithari had ever fielded. They did the same with shield technology, sensor systems, and engine designs. The Vithari have been using the same basic technology for 200 years, Marsh told Price during a progress briefing. They have never had a reason to innovate. Nobody has ever pushed them hard enough. Price nodded. And us? Marsh allowed herself a small, grim smile. We have been at war with each other for 10,000 years. Innovation is what we do. Nathan Cole spent those 3 months turning himself and his crew into a weapon. Promoted to full commander, he oversaw the construction and fitting of the new Ironclad, a heavy cruiser built from the frame of his old frigate, but upgraded in every possible way. Heavier armor, more powerful engines, weapon systems that Marsh's team had designed specifically to cut through Vithari defenses. Megan Holt joined him as his tactical officer. She walked with a slight limp now, a permanent reminder of New Helena. She never complained about it. She never talked about what she had seen in that collapsed bunker. She simply studied Vithari battle tactics for 16 hours a day and designed counter-strategies for every one of them. When Cole asked her how she was doing, she looked at him with calm, steady eyes and said, "I will be fine when this is over." Kyle Brewer trained his Marines in a facility on Mars. His unit was designated for boarding operations, the most dangerous job in space combat. They practiced in zero gravity, in pressurized corridors, in simulated Vithari ship interiors that Marsh's team had built based on recovered intelligence. Brewer drilled them until they could clear a Vithari corridor in their sleep. He was hard on them because he knew what was coming, and he wanted every single one of them to come home alive. At the Galactic Council, Watts found an unexpected friend. Liaison Ithin of the Solari Compact approached her after a session one evening. The Solari were a slender, quiet species, with silver skin and large dark eyes. They had almost been conquered by the Vithari 3 generations ago, and had survived only by surrendering territory and paying tribute. Ithan spoke carefully. "I am not authorized to offer you official support." Watts understood immediately, and unofficially? Ithan handed her a data chip. "This contains navigational charts for Vithari-controlled space, supply depot locations, fleet deployment patterns." Watts took the chip. "Why?" Ithan's dark eyes held something that looked very much like hope, "Because no one has ever fought back against the Vithari, and I want to see what happens when someone finally does." Watts thanked Ithan quietly and sent the data to Earth that night. By the end of the 3rd month, the Earth fleet was assembled. 200 warships gathered in deep space behind a gas giant in an empty system far from any trade routes or sensor networks. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, troop carriers, and support ships hung in the darkness like sleeping predators. 30,000 Marines sat in their deployment bays, checking weapons, reviewing mission plans, and writing letters home. Cole stood on the bridge of the ironclad and looked at the fleet spread out before him on the tactical display. Every one of them built in 3 months by a species that the galaxy had written off as irrelevant. Megan Holt took her station beside him. "All ships report ready, Commander." Cole opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm. "All ships, this is Commander Cole. You all know why we are here. You all know what was taken from us. 3 months ago, the galaxy watched us bleed and did nothing. Today, we show them what that was a mistake. All ships, advance to hyperspace coordinates. We move now." 200 ships lit their engines as one and vanished into hyperspace. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Vethari garrison commander on New Helena was having a quiet evening when his sensors went dead. Not weak, not flickering, dead. Every orbital sensor, every ground-based scanner, every satellite in orbit around the planet went dark at the same instant. He had 3 seconds to wonder what was happening before the sky above him filled with human warships. Nathan Cole watched from the bridge of the ironclad as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around New Helena. The planet hung below them, scarred and occupied, but still there, still alive. "Tactical report," he said. Megan Holt's fingers moved across her console with cold precision. 14 Vethari warships in orbit, 2 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, 7 patrol craft. Ground installations include 3 military bases and an orbital tether station. Enemy shields are active, but their sensors are still blind from our electronic warfare packages. "Light 'em up." The ironclad fired first. Its forward batteries sent beams of white-blue energy into the nearest Vethari cruiser. The Vethari shields, designed to withstand the weapons of a dozen conquered species, held for exactly 1.4 seconds. Then they collapsed. The beam cut through the hull like a hot blade through paper. The cruiser broke apart in a bloom of fire and spinning metal. Around the planet, the rest of the human fleet opened fire simultaneously. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 20 minutes. The Vethari ships were destroyed so quickly that most of them never managed to return fire. The few shots they did get off splashed harmlessly against human shields that had been specifically engineered to absorb Vethari plasma weapons. Holt marked each kill on her display with quiet efficiency. When the last Vethari ship in orbit was reduced to drifting wreckage, she looked up. "Orbital space is clear, Commander." Cole nodded. "Send in the Marines." 40 kilometers below, Kyle Brewer felt the drop pod shudder as it punched through the atmosphere. He was packed in with 11 other Marines, all of them strapped into crash seats, with weapons locked and loaded. Through the narrow viewport, he could see the surface of New Helena rushing up to meet them. He could see the ruins of the colony where he had fought 3 months ago. He could see the Vethari military base they were about to hit. 30 seconds, he shouted over the noise. The pods slammed into the ground, hard enough to crack concrete. The doors blew open, and Brewer was out and moving before the dust settled. All around him, other pods were landing, hundreds of them, falling from the sky like iron rain. The Vathari ground troops responded quickly. He had to give them that. They were disciplined soldiers, and they formed defensive lines within minutes. Plasma fire streaked across the battlefield in bright green bolts. But the humans did not fight like any species the Vathari had faced before. Brewer's Marines moved in coordinated four-person fire teams, leapfrogging forward, covering each other, never stopping. When one team was pinned down, another flanked. When the Vathari held a position, the humans called in precision strikes from orbit that hit within meters of their own troops. The Vathari had never seen a species willing to call in fire that close. The fighting was brutal. Building by building, corridor by corridor, the Marines pushed the Vathari back. Brewer led from the front. He kicked open a door and found 3 Vathari soldiers waiting inside. He shot 2 of them before they could raise their weapons. The third one swung at him with a blade. Brewer caught the blade on his armored forearm, stepped inside the Vathari's reach, and put it down with a single shot. "Building clear," he reported, moving to the next one. By nightfall, the 3 Vathari military bases on New Helena had fallen. The planet was free. But Cole was not finished. At the same moment the attack on New Helena began, 5 other human strike forces hit 5 other targets across Vathari-controlled space. Korat Station, the Vathari's primary forward naval base, was attacked by a fleet of 60 human warships. The station's defenses were impressive. 400 weapons platforms, heavy shield generators, and a garrison of 30 warships. It lasted 2 hours. The humans did not simply attack Korat Station. They systematically dismantled it. First, electronic warfare blinded its sensors. Then, precision strikes took out the shield generators one by one. Then, the warships moved in and tore the garrison fleet apart, while Marine boarding parties seized the weapons platforms and turned them against the station itself. When it was over, Korath Station was a field of debris drifting in the void. Supply depots, fuel reserves, communication relays, and shipyard facilities across 4 other systems fell on the same day. The Vathari Dominion's military infrastructure in the region was not just damaged, it was erased. War Commander Trethak received the reports aboard his flagship as he rushed back from the far side of Vathari space. He read them 3 times because he could not believe them. Korat Station, gone. New Helena, recaptured. 5 major installations, destroyed, all within the same day. He gathered his main battle fleet, every ship he could assemble on short notice, and moved to intercept the humans near the Vetha Nebula. It was still the largest Vathari battle fleet assembled in decades. Cole met him with 80 ships. Drethak expected a standard fleet engagement, 2 formations facing each other, and trading fire until one side broke. That was how wars were fought. That was how they had always been fought. Cole did not fight that way. The human fleet split into 3 groups that moved independently, striking from different angles, forcing the Vathari to divide their fire. Electronic warfare platforms jammed Vathari communications, so their ships could not coordinate. Precision strikes targeted command vessels and flagship bridges specifically. And then, in the middle of the battle, Brewer's marine transports punched through the Vathari formation and began boarding enemy ships. The Vathari had never been boarded in combat. They did not know how to respond to human marines cutting through their airlocks and fighting through their corridors. Ship after ship fell silent as marine teams seized control of their bridges. Brewer personally led the assault on Drethak's flagship. His team breached the hull through a torpedo tube, fought through 9 decks of Vathari resistance, and reached the bridge in 41 minutes. Brewer found Drethak standing in the center of the bridge with a weapon in his hand. The Vithari war commander fired twice. Both shots missed. Brewer did not miss. The stun round hit Drethak in the chest and dropped him to the deck. Brewer stood over the unconscious body of the most feared military commander in Vithari history and keyed his comm. Ironclad, this is Brewer. Flagship is secured. The war commander is alive and in custody. On the bridge of the Ironclad, Cole closed his eyes for one moment. Just one. Then he opened them. Signal all ships. The battle is over. Across the galaxy, in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the tactical displays updated in real time. Delegates watched in stunned silence as system after system changed color from Vithari red to human blue. The hall was completely quiet. No one spoke, no one moved. Ambassador Diane Watts sat in her seat and watched the display along with everyone else. She did not smile. She did not speak. She simply folded her hands in her lap and waited. High Arbiter Zorath stared at the screen for a very long time. Then he turned and looked at the human ambassador sitting quietly among the delegates of 200 species. For the first time in his long career, Zorath felt afraid. The Galactic Council had not seen chaos like this in over a century. Delegates shouted over each other. Aides ran between stations, carrying emergency reports. Communication channels across the chamber buzzed with 100 different languages, all saying the same thing. How did this happen? The Vithari ambassador, a tall reptilian named Zorath, was the loudest voice in the room. He stood at his podium and slammed his clawed fist against the console so hard that it cracked the screen. "This is an act of war," he roared. "The humans have launched an unprovoked military assault on sovereign Vithari territory. The Council must respond. Send peacekeeping fleets. Impose sanctions. These primitives must be put in their place." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. 3 months ago, many of them would have agreed. 3 months ago, humans were a minor species that most of them could not even identify by sight. But that was before 80 human warships had torn apart the largest Vithari battle fleet assembled in decades. That was before a species classified as Tier 5 had done something that no Tier 1 power had ever managed. High Arbiter Zorath called for order. It took him several minutes to get it. When the chamber finally quieted, he turned to the human delegation's station. "Ambassador Watts, the Council requires an explanation." Diane Watts stood. She was not a tall woman. She did not have an impressive voice. She wore a simple dark suit with no decorations or medals. She looked, by every galactic standard, completely ordinary. She activated her podium display and began speaking in the same calm, measured tone she had used for 3 months of ignored protests. On Stardate 7741.3, a Vithari warfleet consisting of over 100 warships attacked the human colony of New Helena without warning, without provocation, and without any prior territorial dispute on record. The attack killed 40,000 civilians, including 6,000 children. She paused to let that number settle in the room. "Following the attack, I stood in this chamber and formally requested arbitration under Galactic Council statutes. That request was acknowledged and assigned to a review committee with a 9-month waiting period. I filed 14 additional protests, 4 requests for emergency session, and 2 appeals for humanitarian aid. Every single one was either denied, delayed, or ignored." She looked directly at Zorath. During this time, the Vithari ambassador publicly mocked these proceedings. No council member objected. The chamber was very quiet now. Watts continued. "Earth attempted every diplomatic channel available to us. We followed your rules. We respected your process. We waited. And while we waited, the Vithari fortified their position on our colony world and began planning further expansion into human space." She tapped her display, and a map appeared showing Vithari fleet movements toward 2 other human systems. This is intelligence we gathered during the past 3 months. The Vithari did not intend to stop at New Helena. They intended to take 3 more of our worlds within the next year. Sorath hissed from his podium. Lies! Fabricated intelligence from a desperate species. Watts did not look at him. The intelligence was confirmed by independent sources that I am prepared to identify if the Council wishes. Across the chamber, Liaison Ithan of the Solari Compact sat very still. Watts was protecting the source, but the implication was clear. Earth's position is as follows, Watts said. The military action taken against the Vithari Dominion was a defensive response to an unprovoked attack on our civilian population. We have reclaimed our territory. We have neutralized the immediate threat to our remaining colonies. We consider this matter concluded. She paused again. However, I want to be perfectly clear about one thing. If any species, any coalition, or any power in this galaxy attacks human territory again, the response will be the same. We did not start this, but we have demonstrated that we are fully capable of finishing it. She sat down. The silence lasted for a long time. Zorath looked around the chamber. He had led the Council for 40 years. He had navigated wars between Tier 1 powers, trade disputes that spanned entire sectors, and political crises that threatened to dissolve the Council itself. He had never seen a room this quiet. The Vithari ambassador demanded a vote on military intervention against Earth. Zorath called for it. The motion failed so completely that it was almost embarrassing. Only the Vithari and 2 of their closest client species voted in favor. Over 160 species voted against or abstained. The message was clear. The galaxy was not going to fight humanity on the Vithari's behalf. Not now, not after what they had just seen. In the days that followed, the political landscape of the galaxy shifted in ways that had not happened in generations. Liaison Ithan stood before the full council and delivered a speech that broke decades of Solari diplomatic neutrality. The Solari had suffered under Vithari aggression for 3 generations, Ithan said. They had paid tribute, surrendered territory, and lived in fear. The humans had shown that the Vithari were not invincible. The Solari would no longer be silent. It was as if a dam had broken. Over the next 2 weeks, 31 species sent diplomatic communications to Earth. Some offered trade agreements, some offered technology exchanges. 12 of them formally requested mutual defense pacts. These were species that had lived in the shadow of Vithari power for decades or centuries, too small and too afraid to stand alone. Now they saw a chance. On Earth, the mood was complex. There was relief, there was pride, but there was no celebration. 40,000 people were still dead. Director Aaron Price addressed the planet in a broadcast that was watched by every human alive. He stood in front of a memorial wall that listed every name of every person killed on New Helena. He read some of those names aloud. Then he spoke about the soldiers who had fought to take the colony back, the ones who came home and the ones who did not. We did not want this fight, Price said. We wanted to farm. We wanted to build. We wanted to raise our children under a different sun. That was taken from us, and we answered, not with hatred, but with the simple, absolute refusal to accept what was done to us. Dr. Linda Marsh held a press conference where she presented a declassified summary of the technology advancements made during the 3-month mobilization. New weapon systems, new shield designs, new engine configurations. She explained that these were not temporary measures. They were permanent upgrades to humanity's military capability. The message was not aimed at the public. It was aimed at every intelligence agency in the galaxy that was watching the broadcast. Nathan Cole brought the ironclad home. The ship entered Earth orbit, trailing scorch marks and patched hull breaches, a warrior returning from the field. Cole stood on the bridge with Megan Holt beside him as they passed over the blue curve of Earth. "How does it feel?" Holt asked. Cole thought about it. It feels like a beginning. In a holding facility on the moon, War Commander Drethak sat in a clean, well-lit cell. He had been treated with respect. His injuries had been healed. He was fed properly. This confused him more than the defeat itself. Every species the Vithari had ever conquered either tried to execute captured leaders or kept them in terrible conditions as trophies. The humans did neither. They simply held him and waited. Drethak sat in his cell and tried to understand the species that had beaten him. He had studied their military capabilities before the battle. He had underestimated their weapons, their tactics, their speed, and their willingness to take risks. But the thing that disturbed him most was something he could not put into a military report. It was the look in their eyes. Every human he had seen, from the Marines who captured him to the guards who watched his cell, had the same look. It was not cruelty. It was not rage. It was something colder and more dangerous than either. It was the look of a species that would never, ever stop coming. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Vetha Nebula, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Galactic Council formally reclassified humanity from Tier 5 to Tier 1 military status. It was the fastest reclassification in galactic history. Only 4 other species, in a community of over 200, held that rank. The vote was not even close. When the announcement was made in the council chamber, Ambassador Diane Watts accepted it with a polite nod and nothing more. She did not give a victory speech. She did not boast. She simply thanked the council and returned to her work. This unsettled the other delegates more than any show of force could have. A species that celebrated its power was predictable. A species that treated it as routine was terrifying. On New Helena, the rebuilding had begun in earnest. The scars of the Vithari bombardment were still visible. Craters dotted the landscape where settlement blocks had once stood. Twisted metal frames reached up from the ground like broken bones. But between those scars, new structures were rising. Kyle Brewer had been reassigned to lead the colony's permanent defense garrison. He had argued against it at first. He was a combat marine, not a garrison commander. But when he landed on the surface and walked through the ruins of the settlement where he had fought, where he had carried 2 children to safety while the sky burned, he understood why they had sent him. He stood at the site of the South Bunker, where he had held the line for 19 hours. The bunker door still had claw marks on it from the Vithari who had tried to get through. Brewer ran his fingers over those marks, then turned and walked to the new garrison headquarters. There was work to do. Colonists began returning within weeks. They came on transport ships from Earth, from Mars, from the orbital stations. Some of them were survivors, coming back to reclaim their homes. Some were new settlers, volunteers who had signed up to help rebuild. They brought seeds, building materials, medical supplies, and something harder to quantify but just as important: stubbornness. Children played in the streets again. Not the same children, but children all the same. In the halls of the Galactic Council, Liaison Ithan stood before the full assembly and presented a resolution. It had taken months of negotiations, quiet conversations, and careful diplomacy to put it together. The resolution was co-sponsored by 31 species, the largest coalition to back a single piece of galactic legislation in over 50 years. The resolution formally condemned the Vethari attack on New Helena. It established new protections for developing species' territorial claims. It created an oversight committee on interspecies conflict resolution with real authority to act, not just review and delay. And it set the precedent that unprovoked aggression against civilian populations would be met with tangible consequences from the Council, not just words. Zorath read the resolution aloud to the chamber. When he reached the final clause, he paused and looked up at the assembled delegates. He had led this council for decades, and in that time it had become slow, cautious, and more concerned with avoiding conflict than preventing injustice. The humans had not just defeated the Vithari, they had exposed the Council's failure. The resolution passed with an overwhelming majority. The Vithari and their few remaining allies voted against it. It did not matter. Ambassador Watts was appointed to the new Oversight Committee alongside Ithan. The two of them developed a working relationship that quickly became one of the most effective diplomatic partnerships in Council history. Watts brought directness and an absolute refusal to tolerate delays. Ithan brought patience, deep knowledge of galactic politics, and a network of quiet alliances built over decades. Together they were fair but impossible to ignore. The Vithari Dominions signed a non-aggression treaty with Earth. They had no choice. Their forward military infrastructure was gone. Their main battle fleet was shattered. Their political allies had abandoned them. War Commander Drethak was returned to the Vithari as part of the agreement. Drethak stepped off the transport ship on the Vithari homeworld and was met by a delegation of Dominion officials. They expected him to be broken, shamed, reduced. He was none of those things. He was quiet. He walked past the officials without speaking and went directly to his private quarters. He never gave a public statement about his defeat. He never wrote a report. He simply withdrew from military life and was never seen in public again. Some said he was disgraced. Others, the ones who understood what he had seen, knew it was something else. Drethak had looked into the eyes of humanity and understood something that the rest of the Vithari leadership still refused to accept. They were not dealing with a minor species that had gotten lucky. They were dealing with a force that would reshape the galaxy. Dr. Linda Marsh returned to her research with a new focus. The weapons programs were complete and running. Humanity's military edge was secure. Now she turned her attention to something else. Working with Silari scientists, she launched a joint research project to improve hyperspace navigation technology. The project had the potential to reduce travel times across the galaxy by 40%. It was open to any species that wanted to participate. 14 species joined in the first month. It was, Marsh told a colleague, exactly the kind of thing humanity should be known for. Not just the ability to destroy, but the willingness to build. Director Aaron Price stepped down from his position 6 months after the retaliation. He had served longer than he had planned and done more than he had ever expected. In his final address, he did not talk about victory. "We did not ask for the power we now hold," he said. "We did not seek it. It was forced upon us by an attack that should never have happened, and a galaxy that looked the other way when it did. We answered that attack because we had no other choice, but now we do have a choice. We can use what we have built to make this galaxy safer, fairer, and better. Not just for humans, but for every species that has ever been afraid of the next fleet appearing over their horizon. That is our responsibility now, and I believe we are ready for it." Nathan Cole, newly promoted to Admiral, was not on Earth for Price's farewell address. He was aboard the Ironclad, in orbit above New Helena. The ship had been repaired, upgraded, and polished until its hull gleamed. It was the flagship of Earth's defense fleet now, a symbol of everything humanity had endured and everything it had become. Megan Holt stood beside him on the observation deck. Below them, the colony lights of New Helena were flickering on as evening fell across the hemisphere. The lights were sparse, still, scattered among the dark patches where the bombardment had left its marks. But they were there, bright and warm and growing. "It is beautiful," Holt said quietly. Cole nodded. He thought about the day 3 months ago, when he had watched this planet burn from the edge of the system. He thought about the vow he had made, and the price that had been paid to keep it. He thought about the dead and the living, and the ones who would come after. "Do you think they will test us again?" Holt asked. They stretched out in every direction, billions of them, each one a sun with its own worlds and its own stories. Somewhere out there, species were watching. Some with admiration, some with fear, some perhaps with the same hungry ambition that had driven the Vithari to attack New Helena. I hope not, Cole said, but if they do, we will be ready. Holt smiled, just slightly, and they stood together in silence as the ironclad turned slowly toward open space. Around them, a patrol formation of Earth warships fell into line, sleek and dark and powerful against the stars. Below, New Helena turned on its axis. Lights came on in the new houses. A child's laughter echoed through a rebuilt street. A farmer checked the evening readings on his crop monitors and nodded with satisfaction. A memorial wall near the center of town displayed 40,000 names, carved in stone, lit from below so they could be read at any hour. Above, the fleet moved outward into the black. Silent, watchful, ready. The galaxy turned around them, and nothing was the same as it had been before. The morning sun on New Helena was pale orange, not like the yellow sun back on Earth, but the colonists had gotten used to it. 40,000 people lived on this world now. Farmers worked the fields outside the settlement domes. Children ran through the streets of the main colony hub, laughing and chasing each other between cargo containers. Shuttle engines hummed overhead as ore transports lifted off toward the orbital stations. Commander Nathan Cole sat in the bridge of the patrol frigate Ironclad, watching the planet turn slowly below him. It was a quiet posting. Nothing ever happened out here on the rim. He leaned back in his chair and opened a comm channel to the surface. "Holt, you down there?" Lieutenant Megan Holt's voice came back with a slight crackle. "I'm at the supply depot. Third shipment today. These farmers grow more food than we can move." Cole smiled. "Better too much food than too little." Holt, out. Cole closed the channel and looked out at the stars. It was peaceful. He liked peaceful. That peace lasted exactly 11 more minutes. The sensor officer shouted first. "Contact. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Sir, I'm reading over 100 ships." Cole was on his feet instantly. "Identify them." "Unknown configuration. Reptilian design signatures." "Sir, they're not in any allied database." The ships filled the screen. They were dark, angular, and massive. The largest ones were 10 times the size of the Ironclad. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out around the planet like a net closing around a fish. "All hands to battle stations," Cole ordered. "Get me a channel to the surface. Now." On the ground, Megan Holt heard the alarms before she heard the explosions. The sky above the settlement dome turned white as the orbital defense platforms were hit. She looked up and saw streaks of fire falling from the sky, pieces of destroyed stations burning through the atmosphere. "Everyone underground," she screamed. "Move! Move now!" Sergeant Kyle Brewer was already running. He grabbed 2 children who were frozen in fear and carried them under each arm toward the nearest bunker entrance. Behind him, the first bombardment hit the colony. The ground shook so hard he fell to his knees. He got back up and kept running. The Vithari had arrived. War Commander Drethak stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human colony burn with the same interest a person might give to crushing an insect. His species had conquered dozens of worlds this way. Find a settlement, destroy its defenses, take the planet. It was simple. It was efficient. It was the Vithari way. "The orbital platforms are destroyed," his tactical officer reported. "One small warship remains. It is attempting to shield the evacuation transports." Drethak looked at the tiny frigate on his screen. It was throwing itself between his warships and the fleeing transports, taking hit after hit. Its shields were failing. Armor was peeling away from its hull. But it kept fighting. "Brave," Drethak said. "Stupid, but brave. Destroy it." But Cole had no intention of dying today. Not because he was afraid, but because dead men cannot take revenge. He ordered the helmsman to pull back, buying just enough time for 3 transports to jump to hyperspace. Then he sent the distress signal. He put everything into it. Every detail, every image, every death. "Get us out of here," he said quietly. The ironclad limped away into hyperspace, broken and burning. Behind it, New Helena died. On the surface, the Vithari dropships landed. Thousands of Vithari soldiers poured out, tall reptilian warriors in dark armor carrying plasma rifles. They moved through the colony with mechanical precision. Buildings were demolished. Infrastructure was seized. Anyone who resisted was killed. Many who did not resist were killed too. Megan Holt hid in a collapsed bunker with 37 survivors for 2 days. She had burns on her left arm and a piece of shrapnel in her leg. She kept the others quiet. She kept them alive. When a rescue shuttle finally reached them, she was the last one out. Kyle Brewer held a defensive position at the South Bunker complex for 19 hours. He had 14 Marines and over 200 civilians behind him. When his ammunition ran out, he rigged explosive traps from mining charges. When those ran out, he fought with a knife. A Vithari soldier broke his left arm. Brewer killed it with his right. When relief finally came, he was still standing in front of that bunker bore. 43,000 people had lived on New Helena before the attack. Only 3,000 survived. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the news arrived as a routine report. A species called the Vithari had claimed a world previously settled by a species called humans. High Arbiter Zorath read the summary and set it aside. This sort of thing happened. The galaxy was large, and territory changed hands. The humans were a minor species, recently admitted to the galactic community. They had settled too close to Vithari expansion space. It was unfortunate, but it was not the Council's concern. Several delegates privately agreed. A few even suggested the humans had been foolish to expand so aggressively without proper military protection. No one proposed sanctions against the Vithari. No one offered aid to the humans. Ambassador Diane Watts stood at her station in the council chamber and formally requested arbitration. Her voice was steady. Her hands were steady. Inside, she was shaking with a rage so deep it frightened her. The council acknowledged her request and assigned it to a review committee. The committee's first available session was in 9 months. Watts returned to her quarters and sent a single encrypted message to Earth. No help is coming. On Earth, the distress signal from the ironclad hit like a bomb. People watched the footage in horror. Entire cities on New Helena reduced to rubble. Bodies in the streets. The faces of children who would never grow up. Director Aaron Price sat in the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council and listened as Dr. Linda Marsh presented her intelligence report on the Vithari. They were strong. They were experienced. They had conquered dozens of species across centuries. Their fleet outnumbered Earth's by a factor of 4. The room was silent when she finished. Price looked around the table at the faces of generals, admirals, scientists, and world leaders. He saw fear in some of those faces. He saw grief in others. But in every single pair of eyes, he saw the same thing underneath it all. Cold, absolute fury. Price stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not pound the table. He simply said, "We are going to make them pay for every single life they took. And when we are done, the entire galaxy is going to remember what happens when you attack humanity." No one in that room disagreed.